Okay. So we're here with Chris McKay, and we are going through Hardie training. We just walked around my house and did a full measure with kind of some assumptions on some siding that really wasn't siding, but just for the sake of the drill and having some extra surface area to measure. We kind of, like I said, fudged it on a few parts and pretended it was siding when it's actually brick. But so what we're going to do right now, Chris is in the process of moving from windows to siding. So that's what we're talking about here. Talking about one, which we just did on our walk around of the exterior, talked about measuring. And now we're basically talking about how do we build the spreadsheet and populate the spreadsheet for multiple phases. And then how do we take that information, assuming we sold the job, and how do we take that information and get it prepared to where we can get it into Market Sharp and get it into a usable format for installation. So that's what, for the sake of this video, what we're going to cover and walk through as far as this portion goes. So we're going to just jump right into it. I'm going to do a screen share here so we can see the spreadsheet, and then we will be off and running. So you should see my spreadsheet now, Chris, or your spreadsheet.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me maximize this. Great. So it's the firewall, you're going to notice, has a lot of similarities to every other firewall. So we have our main accounting page here, pretty self-explanatory. Your consultation form that you'll use in the home, your payment options with all of your pricing and discounts. There you go. It's a little hard to center on this one like we do, just so the screen view is appropriate, like on the iPad, so we won't spend too much time on this. This is where your scope of work video is going to be. Chris has spent some time over the last couple of weeks on my work YouTube channel, looking at all the project videos so he can kind of get a sense. But the first step after we do our Hardie scope of work video is uploading it to YouTube. Once we do that, we can get a link that's shareable. And then basically we put that link right here. So installation can go grab this link, and then they have an active link for your Hardie scope of work video. So that's what this page is. From there, we have the Hardie spec sheet, which we will fill out for the sake of today. We have the labor tracker here, knowing that we are aiming for our labor burden right here to be 15% or less. So this is, of course, there's many more complications to producing a job. When I say producing, I mean installing it correctly to gross profit margin target. But this is going to give us an initial assessment right off the bat. Did we price this correctly? And that indicator is this number here, labor burden being less than 15 or 15%. So we'll fill out that sheet. This is the measuring tab. So when you take the client out to walk around the house, this is where this is going to be, basically accounted for. All your measurements, your porch ceiling, your fascia, your soffit, your window wraps, door wraps, gutters, fascia rot repair, rot wood repair. What did we not cover? I said window trim, door trim, shutter removal and reinstallation, gable vents, gutters, I think, beam wraps, post wraps, and then any kind of metal drip or Z flashing. So all that's going to be accounted for in this sheet. That sheet then populates over 95, 98% of the information into this nice little pricing sheet here that we can use to basically compute 3 different scopes of work. You see up at the top here where my cursor is, scope A, scope B, and scope C. So we're going to play around with all 3 of those, because this is if you're doing your job correctly, if you're working hard for the client, you will use these scopes with, extreme regularity. So we'll talk about that. From there, kind of going beyond what we're talking about right now, we have our Hardie work order, which we have, of course, the client sign and we sign and we go over with them. And then that's really it for the function of Hardie. So that's kind of the workflow as far as how it progresses here on the firewall. For the sake of what we're doing right now, of course, we would have already have done the consultation form. We're going right into the Hardie measuring form, which Chris and I just populated around the house. So one important note, because really when you get done measuring a house, every one of these boxes should have something in it. So, and that was kind of my bad because we were starting at a high level, just measuring. But I would encourage you to use your voice text. So all you have to do is hit that little microphone button and you can talk all your notes right into here, which every note that's in here, which is why we populate this now instead of 2 hours from now when you sell the job, is because we need on the work order a side-by-side description and account of all the work. So if you do the work on the front end, it's going to be so much easier for you to remember what actually each side looked like instead of you 45 an hour, hour and a half from now selling the job, going through all that's required for that, all the mental capacity that's needed, the bandwidth that's needed to sell the job. Then try to remember, what are we doing on the left side? What are we doing on the back? So the more you can keep these full, all you got to do is go here, copy and paste. And I'm not on an iPad, so the interface is a little bit different here, but go to copy. And then all I got to do is move that right over to my work order and do a paste on the front of the house. See how easy that is? So Chris, I don't fault you for this. It's my fault, if anything, because we were focusing on measuring, but we did talk about the value of using the voice text. But I'm going to go around since we measured my house, and I'm going to put in notes here so you can see how valuable this will be later on during the transition to the work order. So we're going to put paint porch ceiling, paint, I think I have the columns are rock, paint beam around front porch ceiling, circular gable vent. I only have one, so you don't need to really indicate which it is, but circular gable vent. Let's put in gable vent. On front gable to be done in Hardie. Wrap garage door frames. And so the point of doing this voice text, you're walking around, you got laser in the one hand, you got your iPad in the other. You don't want to be typing. Again, you should be getting the sense here. The more notes, the better, for your sake, for the client's sake. Again, we got to think and you got to figure whatever isn't documented is an area for the client to say, oh no, Chris included that. Well, if we don't list explicitly what's included and what's not, we see the gray area we get into, and nobody wants to be there when it's he said, she said. Nobody wants to be there with a client that's giving you 40, 50, 60 grand. And now we're arguing, did Chris include it or did he not include it? One way that we can eliminate the whole funk and the whole weirdness of that is by being crazy good documenters of what's included, what's excluded. Now that can get to an insane degree. So we're not trying to get granular here, but as you're looking at the outside of the house, think of the big things that people might say, oh yeah, we wanted that, or especially if you stop on it long enough to debate or go back and forth, well, should we or shouldn't we? In my mind, instantly a red light comes on and be like, this is something that they want, but they don't know if they want to pay for. This potentially could be a sticking point down the road because they want it, they don't want to pay for it. When 3, 4, 5 weeks, however long our lead time is before we get to actually installing the project, see where their mind could go. Oh no, Chris said it was included because they wanted it included, but didn't want to pay for it at the time of the appointment. Now, of course, things are changed. They're out here, the crews are here, it's getting real, it's go time. No, I want that front porch ceiling to be Hardie, even though they excluded it. So here, paint front porch ceiling, if I talked about it, and we were vacillating between porch ceiling painted, porch ceiling Hardie, I'm going to specifically put here, paint porch ceiling, client declined Hardie porch. That little stupid 5-second phrase could save 30 minutes and 15 emails of back and forth of Chris included, Chris didn't include. See what I'm saying? So the big thing is you're writing these notes. One, we want to be thorough because that's what the client deserves and that's what we promise them. We promise to be better, more professional, more thorough, more complete. So that's something that we promise them. So really, we don't need to go any further. From that standpoint alone, we should do an exceptional job of taking notes here, okay? But it can eliminate hours of frustration and ugliness and anxiety by just putting in a stupid little 5-sentence or 5-word phrase that says client declined Hardie porch ceiling. So that's significantly important to remember as you're starting out on your kind of Hardie career here. Wrap garage door frames with Hardie. What else? So I'm going to put paint, and this is kind of like a blanket. This would be on all of them. Paint fascia, excuse me. Paint soffit, Hardie on the fascia. Okay, so now I got a pretty good scope of work for the front of the house that is clear to me. It's clear to the client. I even have a little exclusion in here. So there could be, you know, I'm eliminating some possible funk down the road. You know, again, like I said, 6, 8, 10 weeks from now when it's time to install. Oh no, Chris said that was included. Definitely. I remember Chris said that was included. Meanwhile, you didn't price for it and you remember something about a discussion about it, but you don't remember where you landed. Well, the best way to document that, put it in your freaking notes right here. Okay. It'll save you. I can't even stress the importance of this. And I did not learn this on day one of me selling Hardie. This is 12 years post selling Hardie that I'm finally smart enough to say, just write 5 words down and it'll save you hours of really uncomfortable discussion. So you can leverage my pain and start it off on day one, putting exceptional notes in here. It will save you a ton of, it'll save you years on your life as far as you having to go back and forth with the client. And I just cannot stress it enough. So, okay, we're done with that. So on the front, on the left side, we got, you know, again, probably full tear off. That's just good to have, just so there's no confusion. And it will help you if you go to reprice a scope or they decide we want to do it, but we want to do it different. This will help you if you need to recount the job 10, 12, 2 years from now, you know, 10, 12 weeks, 2 years from now, you need to recount. What did I say? What were we doing? This is another good, you know, kind of landmark as far as, oh yeah, now I can look at my notes and I know what scope of work I bid. So full tear off. We're going to do, there was pretty much not much going on over there. So replace all siding, Hardie fascia overlay, paint soffit. Ooh, paint soffit. There was really nothing else going on over there. It's pretty straightforward. Hardie fascia overlay, paint soffit. So we're good to go here. Yeah, I think we're good there. So on the back, again, we got, it's easy too if you just start the same way. Full tear off, replace all siding. I'm just gonna put R and D gutters. I think we did R and R, but whatever. R and R gutters, satellite dish to stay where it's located. 8 feet where we do not need to remove gutters on the fascia. Client declined Hardie porch on rear porch ceiling. Okay, so we put another decline in here. So we spoke about it. Client wants to keep the wood that they have up there, so we're good to go. And I'm going to put that very specifically in here. Client declined Hardie porch and rear porch ceiling due to wood installed. So here also, this is real deal. This is when we had our roof replaced and our gutters replaced. I made it a point that backyard is like one of my kids. Like I love those plants back there. I planted every single one of them. So I'm going to put so if you have something like that where a client's like, look, this is my stuff, this is my jam, I love gardening, I love landscaping, I don't want this stuff damaged, put it in the notes, right? Super easy way. Back door is in brick. So there will be no Hardie trim around back door. 5 windows in siding to get Hardie trim. And then I'm going to do the same thing. And you can even, a benefit to doing it the same kind of pattern is I can go up here, grab this, copy, and paste. So Hardie fascia overlay, paint soffit. Now we got the right side. We pretended there was a little bit of siding over there. So again, full tear off. We did have some gutters. We didn't have a satellite dish, so I'm going to copy this. Bring it down here. Place siding, R&R gutters, 8 feet declined. We don't have porch ceiling. I do have a tree over there I planted, so I'm going to copy this and bring it over. And again, I'm doing this on a Mac, but it's the same thing on an iPad. You know how to copy and paste text. Full tear off, replace all siding, R&R gutters. Client wants to make sure his landscaping is not damaged in any way during install. Comma, and then I'm going to grab, we didn't have any windows. So I'm going to grab this and then I'm done with my scope of work. So it seems like a long process, but when you're doing it in voice text and literally you put your measurements in and the last you verify, like I said, you check your fascia, you check to make sure that you got all your measurements, meaning, okay, I got a big rectangle, small rectangle, and a triangle. Do I have that in my measurements? Do I have 3 areas measured specifically right here? And I'm just saying 3 hypothetically. I got 2 areas that I see on the wall. Do I have 2 areas measured? I do, check. I got my fascia measurement here, check. And I got my tear off, which is just basically taking this column and carrying it over to this column here. Okay. So I have 480, I got 480 here, I got 18, I got 18 here. So my tear offs as it should be. I got any windows or doors that need to be wrapped. I got those notated. Okay, I'm ready to move on to the back after I put my notes in here. And I'm going to stand back with my iPad with the voice, with the microphone activated, and I'm just going to talk. And you'll be surprised. You'll get some typos, but whatever. We're not looking for the fine details here. We want the broad strokes. So you're talking into your iPad. It takes a fraction of the time that it took me to just type all this out, especially because you're on that side of the house. Again, what I've seen people do, a common mistake is for new people is, okay, I got to walk around once to measure. Then I'm going to walk again around the house to take pictures. Then I'm going to walk around again to make sure I got my scope of work right. Meanwhile, the clients are inside like, dude, I got dinner plans. I got to go to the store. What is taking so long? And it just really breeds distrust. So we should only walk around the house once. Okay. So as we do that, we have to do it very systematically so we don't miss anything. Your company cam, like we talked about, Chris, when we walked around, your company cam should be open. So it's a picture of the full side and then a picture of any details, rot, anything specific, any areas that need to be documented. We take pictures, we move on to the next side. But this is one of the last things you should do is put in your notes, take your picture, we fully move on to the next side. And that's after we've done all this reconciling over here with our shapes. Okay, yep, I got 2 shapes, 3 shapes, 5 shapes. I got them measured. I got my fascia. I got my porch ceiling, if there was porch ceiling, such as right there. And I've carried over my tear off. So I'm ready to move on to the next side. Okay, so any questions on that so far, Chris? You see how this, kind of building a good spreadsheet here is going to be hugely impactful in every other thing, any other event or any other task that you're going to have after this. Building a good foundation here is going to be crucial to that being, 1, successful and thorough, but 2, easy. Any questions at all?
Yes, there are no questions. I definitely see how this process builds upon itself into the next steps, which is good. I guess my only question is, so at what point does the video exactly come in? Like, do we go around the house, we do the company cam, we do the measurements and all that stuff, and then we do another lap right after that to do the video? Is that your normal practice, or?
That's a good question. So if you know the scope of work early, which rarely you do, you can do it right after you measure. That's ideal. But honestly, in the world we live in, ideal only happens 50% of the time, as you're well aware. So sometimes, because there is discussion that needs to happen before we nail down the scope of work, sometimes that video is the last thing I do before I leave.
Okay, that makes sense.
That's a safe way to because there's 100 things that could change between the time you walk around and the time you leave the house with an agreed upon price. So this probably the best practice is to do, in that case, what I said is a little bit off base. You may walk around a second separate time to do the scope of work video. If they're 100% sure it's a super basic, easy house, you can do it right after your measurements. You can walk around and do the scope of work video. That's probably only going to happen 30 to 40% of the time, because there just generally is discussion between when the project is inspected and it's measured and final price and is agreed upon and a work order is signed. So I think probably a safe way is to do it, because if you make this video that's 8, 10, 5, 6 minutes long, it doesn't matter. And then in the process of getting to an agreeable price and scope of work, things change. Now you got a video that's somewhat irrelevant, right? So
that makes sense.
As a last step before you leave the house is probably a best practice. It's kind of 6 to 1 and a half dozen the other. It's kind of more risk because a lot of things have transpired since you built the project and did the inspection with them. And now the point where you're leaving the house, there's some possibility that you might miss something in your video. So that's the only caveat to that I would say, or the only disclaimer, is just be super careful with your video. Review the scope of work if you have to make sure that video is correct. But probably the best practice is to do it very last thing before you leave the house.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, so we just built our measurements. We got super duper rock star notes in here that are you're going to see here in a second are going to save you years of your life as we go into building the work order. You'll see how nice this is and how much, how advantageous it is to have this good notes in here before you move on. So we've done that. We've measured here our fascia. We've measured our porch ceiling here. We have all our measurements in per side here. We got our 1-story, our 2-story correct, which does have a huge implication on pricing. We got our tear off correct and the way to reconcile this. So just looking at this, something's off somewhere. So a way to reconcile this is all square feet per side total is 14 and a half, I only have 13.3 squares of tear off. So that's another one of the kind of the internal checks and balances I can do to see, okay, where, and I see it right here. So on the right side of the house, see we have 210 square feet right here. We have 120 right here. So the numbers just transposed a little bit. So now if I put 210, I should have, I'm still a little bit off somewhere.
Yeah, the bottom number is messed up too. Right. That 67 is only at 38 for some reason.
Yeah, so we have 67 here and only 38. So I'm going to change this to 67 and everything's copacetic now. But this is a good way to reconcile, and you very well, you very well likely, even on a full overlay, I always put in a square or two of tear off, just so the guys, if they get up there, they can see a lot better than I can when I'm on the ground and they're on the roof working on the siding right in front of them. They can see much better. So I'm going to give them an allowance basically to say, hey, if you need to tear off something, go ahead and do it, because I built it into the pricing, and the chances are you're going to need a square of tear off even if you're doing a full overlay. But as far as my numbers, I know everything is all good in the hood right here, because I have 14.5 squares of tear off and I got 14.5 squares of total siding. So again, that's another reconciliation you can do to make sure that, okay, I got my pricing all lined up. Down here, you have 136 total linear feet of 1x4 trim. That's windows, doors, and anything else that you would have wrapped with a 1x4, any ancillary pieces. They're all going to be totaled up in this area right here. And you can see when I highlight this box, all these shaded cells is where that cell is populating from. So it's grabbing my trim everywhere. Okay, so now basically we are moving on to the next tab here, which is populated by this sheet that we're on now, the measuring sheet. This is where it populates into, so we can actually formulate a price for the client. So a couple things about this spreadsheet. Let me reduce it just slightly. There we go. A couple things about this spreadsheet. Here's your total siding measurements, 14 and a half, right? Okay, so 14 and a half is our total. Total tear off is 14 and a half, so we're good to go there because I know it's a full tear off. All of my squares are up. So again, the black boxes means these are just placeholders for your information. It's basically computed information that you're going to need, but it's not populating anywhere on its own. The next other place you'll see that is with porch ceiling. So porch ceiling, these are placeholders because there's variations of what we do with porch ceiling. It's a placeholder. It's not populating down into these cells that influence price. So it's important to understand that when you see a black cell, it's just a placeholder of saying, hey, FYI, this is how much information or how much square feet, linear feet you have, so you can populate your sheet properly. Any questions on that?
No, sir.
Okay. So I got 14 and a half total square, 14 and a half squares, which is basically a square is 100 square feet. So if we multiply that, we know we can speak intelligently and tell a client you have 1,450 square feet of siding on your house. Down here, you have to be careful to indicate the right, so there we go, indicate the right style of siding. So as you see, these all have different price points. So it's super important for you to select the right one. In this cell, we have this Cedar Mill Select or Smooth 8 1/4. Here's your Colonial Smooth, beaded Colonial Rough Sawn, or any other exposure. Goes in this box, which is $469 a square. We got your siding, which is 4x8 panel, stucco or smooth. Here we have an adder column or an adder row for anything smaller or larger than 8 1/4 inch board. So if a client wants a 12-inch board, we have to put our number of squares in here. If a client wants a 5 1/4, we have to put our number of squares in here. Right here. Okay. Here's the shingles, which you don't do all that often. Here is your board and batten. Cedar Mill Select does not include 1x2. So that's crucial to understand that, because there we go. We need to add in 1x2 per square if we're doing board and batten. And there's no magic. I mean, there is a formula, but there's no standardized formula, because that number of 1x2 will change based on if the client wants 12-inch batten, separators, if they want 14, 16, 18, 20, that's going to change the number of the amount of linear feet of 1x2 per square based on how far they want the batten strips spread out. So we'll talk about how to do that, but not in the sake of this video here. So what I'm going to do, I know I'm going to do Cedar Mill Select, so I'm going to put my 14.5 in this square, and then we start populating our price. Okay, so I got 14 point, I don't know why I put in 14.5 and it went to 14.56. I don't know why, but there it is. So as you can see down here, I got 14.5 squares of Tyvek, which actually is Hardie wrap. I need to change that on the master. Hardie install we captured caulk, nails, tear off, OSB labor, OSB materials. Now I know that all 14.5, because of this cell right here, all 14.5 of my squares are up. So what I'm going to have to do in here in the second story labor, I got to put 14.5 squares. OSB is heavy. It's a laminate board. That laminate goop and goo that holds all those, particles of the board together is super heavy. So these guys that have to lift this OSB are installers that have to lift this OSB up to the second story. It takes time, it takes energy, and it takes extra labor hours. So that's why if you don't put this in here, look, if that's a $1,900 difference to the job, it's gonna hurt the job quite a bit, and it's gonna hurt your commission. So you got to grab your second story labor for OSB whenever you have second story squares. And it's not all that common for the whole house to be second story only, but you're definitely going to have a combination. Generally, if it's 14.5, you may have a square or two down. You may have 7 squares down and 7 squares up. So you just got to watch it and make sure that this number in here in the OSB second story labor right there is correct. Okay. Cut up job. I don't really have a cut up job. Most of my walls are long, flat, rectangular. But if you have a house where it's 5 feet and then a corner, and then 6 feet and then a corner, and then 20 feet and then an interior corner, and then 12 feet and another interior corner, I'm going to put 14.5 squares here for extra labor. Again, putting siding on a 20-foot long by 8-foot tall wall is, that's flush, is a lot quicker than having to go in, out, you know what I mean? So that's why when we have a cut up job, that's what that means. It accounts for the extra labor plus the extra trim, because every time we have an interior or exterior corner, there's more cutting, and we also have to use usually an 8-foot tall piece of 1x4 as a transition. Degree of difficulty here. Excuse me. I don't really have any, the whole back they can work off the roof. The right side of the house where we pretended there was some siding is very easy access. The only really area of kind of difficulty, because I have rock and a really high reach, is on my left side. So I'm going to go back to my measuring sheet and see my left side here. I had 498 square feet. So I'm going to call that 5 squares. So back on my Hardie pricing sheet here for degree of difficulty, I'm going to put in 5 squares for that left side of the house. It's not much. It's $434, but it just allows for some extra time because they're going to have to use scaffolding or ladder, and it's going to take extra time. Any questions on that so far?
No, sir, not on that. I do have a question. If you could just clarify, when it says like siding, stucco smooth, or shingles, I mean, is that us putting stucco on the home? I didn't think that's something we did. Is that something different?
No, I need to, so I'm going to make a list because I need to change a few things. I need to change Hardie wrap or Tyvek to Hardie wrap. That is 4x8 Hardie sheets. So I'm going to get me a list going here. Hardie pricing changes. So Tyvek, that's line 13. Okay, and then where it says siding, I'm going to just change that to 4x8 sheet siding.
Yeah, it refers to siding, stucco smooth, siding, shingles. Just curious what that's referring to, actually.
It's just a different profile of siding. So it's not saying we do stucco. It's 4x8 sheet Hardie siding in the stucco pattern or the smooth pattern.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay. So it just looks like stucco.
Yes. Good. That was a good question.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So we just finished with degree of difficulty right here on line 22. Right there. These all populate. So if you see numbers in here, those are your friends. Leave them alone because all of that's populating. The only thing that you have to fill out is white. So any column that's, or any cell that's white, you have to populate that. Any cell that's green is being populated by the cells that you can see being highlighted as I'm clicking. E6, that's correct. Yes. Does that make sense? So the white ones are the only ones you're concerned with populating. Everything else, all these numbers that are already in the green cells, leave them alone. Those are your best friend.
Yes, sir.
So here, again, a manual entry. We're not tearing off soffit, but if you were tearing off any soffit or fascia, you'd have to put that in square feet. So length times width here in this white cell. If you were doing porch ceiling, you would put it in these cells here. And again, this 3.38 is just a placeholder because it's in a black cell. We got single garage wrap, double garage wrap. We're not doing any shutters. We're good to go with shutters. Now here with paint. So say we agreed on we're doing fascia overlay and painting the soffit. So we have to manually put in that soffit paint, plus I'm painting the garage doors. Let's just say it. Let's go. I need to go back to my notes. So just for giggles here, I'm going to put in wrap garage door frames with Hardie. And I'm going to put in paint both double and single garage doors. Okay, so this is where you manually figure in paint, which you will do on probably every job. Okay, so if you notice this spreadsheet, kind of taking a couple steps back, is broken into master categories. See that? So siding materials and labor, trim, fascia, and soffit material and labor, paint material and labor, rot repair and ancillary additional construction, and then permits, travel, housing, disposal, all that junk. So that's a cheap, kind of way to say, okay, where is something I need to add? Where's something I need to check? That's why we split it up like this. So you could easily do that, and it's in kind of compartmentalized fashion. So with the paint here, the way I'm going to get my measurement for that square feet, and again, this is what we would have done here. And this is huge, is soffit 1 foot, fascia 6 inches. It's pretty much that way all the way around the house. So I'm going to put this in everywhere. What are you doing? Come on. So soffit 1 foot, fascia 6 inches. soffit 1 foot, fascia 6 inches, comma. Okay, and then I'm going to put it in here. Client. Okay. So we have basically now on all sides, and it may be different on some homes where you have a foot soffit on one side and then it goes to a 2 foot soffit on the side of the house. That's pretty common. So that's why it's important that you have what's the soffit dimension, what's the fascia dimension on each of the 4 sides. So now back to where we're trying to get here. I'm on my Hardie pricing. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what the heck? How much paint do I need to paint their soffit? That's what we're at right now. So going back to my measure sheet, I'm going to go back over here. And I have 375 linear feet of fascia. Okay. Now, if I had in some places, you don't see it commonly, but you will see where there's fascia but no soffit, meaning the fascia is right up against the house. You don't have any soffit. So then I'm going to put over in the notes, 35 linear feet of fascia only, no soffit. See how that works? But I don't have that in this case, so I know I have 375 feet. My soffit is 1 foot. I got some easy math. I need 3.75 squares for my painting the fascia, or excuse me, Hardie. See how that works?
Yes, sir.
So I put my 375 in here. Well, I also know I'm painting the garage doors. So I got basically, you know, a square and a quarter plus 3/4 square for my garage doors. So I'm just going to add another 2 squares to this. So instead of 375, I'm going to put in 5.75. And now I got painting my soffit in here. And I got painting my garage doors. But let's just say for this, the sake of the drill here, I have 338 square feet of porch ceiling, which is going to be painted. We're not doing Hardie. So now I need to add this porch ceiling, because really the porch ceiling, the soffit, it's the same component, right? It's different things, but it's the same thing, right? It's under the fascia or under the porch. It's kind of the same thing. You look up, you see fascia, you see porch ceiling, or you see soffit, you see porch ceiling. So you want the same kind of remedy for each area that's kind of the same, if that makes sense. So you wouldn't want to do half the fascia one way and half the fascia another way. You wouldn't want to do the soffit one way and the porch ceiling another way generally. So what that means is I'm just gonna, for rounding purposes, I'm gonna call this 3 1/4. So I got 3 1/4. I'm going to call this that I need to add to my 5.75 squares of paint. So if I do 3, that's 8, and 1/4 is 9. So 5.75 plus 3 1/4, I'm looking at 9 total squares of paint. And that includes my soffit, it includes my garage doors, and it includes my porch ceilings, front and back. See why it's important that we get those measurements?
Yes, sir.
So I'm good to go. And again, all my green cells are populating, so I don't have to mess with them. I'm pretty straight there. I didn't have an electrical box. You know, if you, again, your trigger point here, if you have siding on the first story, on the single story, you're probably going to have some sort of electrical box R&R, which, as you can see, it's $744. Electricians pretty much name their own price, so they make a decent wage for the risk and the crazy job they have. So if you forget to put an electrical box remove and reinstallation, that's almost $1,000. It could have an impact on the job. So if you have single story siding, you always want to look and make sure that you got the electrical box. If you add insulation, a lot of people, if we're doing a full tear off, and the builder, didn't do it, which is very rare that they do, up until recent times when homes are getting more, there's more emphasis on it, efficiency. But if you got an older home, something like that, where sure as anything, there's no insulation in the walls, it's a perfect time to do it right now, right? Because all the siding is going to be stripped off the walls. That's probably not going to happen again in this home's lifespan. So here, if I were adding insulation, I'm just going to add 14.5 squares of insulation. And that's labor and materials. So that's us buying it and installing it. If you got burglar bars, that's another white cell here. So that would be something you'd have to put in manually. It's calculated again because it's a green cell, so it's self-populating. I got 92 feet of gutter that I need to remove and reinstall. And we're going to use a third-party company for that. Mortar work, again, that's one that you have to put in manually because it's a white cell. Remove and replace lights, you're going to leave that in no matter what. Here's extra labor hour for one man. Here's any kind of ancillary construction where you kind of name your own cost. You wouldn't do that on your own. That would be something that you and I come up with. It's not going to be something that you're just going to pull out of the air, or if I'm unavailable that you and Jim come up with, whatever. Here, lead charges, asbestos charges, porta potty. If we're way out in the middle of nowhere, we need to charge for a porta potty. And if it's a 3-week project, we probably need to double that because they're going to have to come and empty it, probably once a week. So just be careful of that. If it's out of town and there's no restaurant or gas station close by, you want to charge for extra porta potty.
Real quick, sir, when would we charge for mortar work needed per 8-foot section? Is that kind of like a standard thing we look for, or?
So remember that freeze board?
Yes.
We can look at it again. It'll make more sense to you. But if you look at the front of my house where it's all rock, stone.
Okay.
But I have that little 1x4 freeze board over my rock.
Got it.
If that's wood for a lot of older homes, right? Fortunately, we have a composite board, but a lot of homes, that's wood and it rots. If that rots and you want to replace it with Hardie 1x4, you can do that all day long, but that needs, there needs to be mortar there to seal it and to hold that 1x4 freeze board to the wall.
All right. So essentially anytime we have Hardie that's going to be on top of rock, we need to do some sort of mortar touch up.
Correct. And we can look at that on the front of my house so I can show you more detailed what that looks like.
And that's in and that's per 8-foot square, right? 8-foot section? Per
8-foot linear feet.
Okay.
Let me change that. Line 71 should be linear feet, not section. Line 71.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's another big thing, because that adds up quick. Because usually that's, I probably front. I mean, it's every gable, where there's brick. So, I mean, I probably got how many ever fascia are on the front of my house. So let's go back to the measuring sheet. You can see what I'm doing here. I mean, how many times have we toggled back to this measure sheet?
Yes, sir.
To try to get information. So this has to be your foundation. If this is off, if you screwed up, if you don't follow the process that I told you about, start high, work down, start left, work right, and you miss something, everything that you do from that point on is going to be off, which probably a really good chance that job's not going to GP and you're not going to get paid. So if I look at the front of my house, I got 140 feet, we said, of linear feet of, 135 linear feet of fascia, which is probably going to be the same as my freeze board. So on my pricing sheet, I know here per 8 feet, if I divided 8 by 135, let's call it 140. $17.5. So I need to put in here 18. That's $1,000.
Yeah, and that's just one. That's just the front of the house. I mean, that could be all 4 sides. That could be 5,000 easy.
We kind of pretended I had siding on all 4 sides, even though I only have it on the the left and the back. So in that event, we wouldn't need it where there's siding because then we caulk it, right? What we're concerned about is where we're putting Hardie with brick, rock, stone, or otherwise, something non-Hardie. That's where we need to mortar.
Makes sense.
So your lead, asbestos, porta potty we talked about. Again, down here out of town, 20 miles or more, we need to charge this fee per square. I'm not 20 miles out of town, so we don't need it. Permit fees, you would check here, and it carries it over automatically to right here. And then these would be something you and I would talk about, but travel and lodging, less than $30,000 job. Travel and lodging, and this is per day. Travel and lodging greater than 30,000 total job.
And I'm guessing there's some like threshold, right? Like 60 miles out of town or something.
Yes. Yeah, this is something where this came up. I've had a couple jobs. I don't think anybody else has, where I've negotiated, like it's some hunting lodge or hunting lease or whatever. Nobody's using it. It's the off season, which is always when they want to fix stuff up. So I've negotiated the guys will stay down there. Right. So they stay in the house they're working on because it's a hunting cabin or a lodge, really. I mean, nobody invests this kind of money on just a little trailer, basically. It's usually a really nice hunting cabin or hunting lodge where we're doing work on. They're not using it. Nobody's down there. Let the guys stay there. That's 2 hours of their day that they're not driving. They're working.
Makes sense.
But we still have to give them food and, things like that, a per diem, because they're literally staying on site. We have to pay them for that somehow. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So we just built Scope A on my house, and Scope A is right here. So my retail price for all that we just put together, doing the whole shoot match, again, with some assumptions here that we're doing more siding. We added siding to the front of my house, to the right of my house, that's not there. So it's a drill, but with some, kind of exceptions, this is the price for my siding. Now, where we can leverage this spreadsheet, the value of this is I have a Scope B and a Scope C on here. And this will happen quite a bit, is people start off thinking like, I want everything on the outside of my house Hardie. And then you get the price and they're like, I had no idea it was going to cost 80, 90 grand. So you say, hey, no problem. I understand completely. You can eliminate this a lot of times by doing really good price conditioning. But say we missed it. They didn't pick up what we were trying to, throw down as far as price conditioning, which is somewhat our responsibility. But we get to the end, the scope of the work doesn't match their budget. So we don't want to just say, okay, cool, thanks, and leave. We want to say, okay, well, as we walked around, we talked about some things that were musts and some things that were, I'd like to's, right? I'd like to have it if we can afford it, but it's not necessary. I really have to address this. So we're going to work on a couple different scopes, and I'll show you how this is utilized. 1221. So say, for instance, we're going to, again, dwindle down the scope of work somewhat, but not drastic. So I'm going to tell them, okay, Chris, what I'm going to do for you is I'm going to work up an alternative scope, still addressing the major things, plus a couple of things you said would be nice. And then I'm going to address a third scope. I'm going to put together a third scope of work for you that's literally, bare bones, basics, nothing more. And then I'll be able to show you the three different prices. So you got the kind of the full boat, the full enchilada, so to speak. You got a need with some wants factored in there as far as your scope of work. And then you got just a bare bones, I need to get this done. So see, what we're doing for the client is really setting them up with a kind of an a la carte, and just saying, here, you just pick one. That's all you have to do. I'm making this so easy for you. I'm accommodating the full deal. I'm accommodating the full deal minus a few of the things that we said we could live without. And then I'm accommodating, this has to be done, because if it doesn't, you're really in jeopardy of some damage to the home.
So that'd be like something like, let's say the front of your house, the siding there was just completely shredded. You absolutely need a new siding. That'd obviously be the need. So that'd be scope C. But for example, they also want to do the sides because you can see the sides of the home and they want it to match. So that'd be scope B. Scope A would be doing the whole home.
Yeah, we're just going to do hypotheticals here because it could be what you just mentioned. A lot of times it will be, especially if they have gutters, because those gutters are expensive, a lot more so than what people just think, oh man, I'll just pay some dude $100 to take down and put my gutters back up. It's not the reality, which is what I told you outside, is the conversation more and more that you need to have with your clients is, look, I can price you taking down and reinstalling all your gutters by a professional gutter company. And I can show that to you next to what it would cost all new gutters. And you'd be like, why would I do that? Same thing I told you about the fascia, right? Fascia overlay versus painting all the fascia.
Yeah.
Show you those two costs and you'd be like, why'd you waste my time? Just put fascia up. It's the same thing with gutters. So one thing you can do is eliminate the fascia work. Okay, well, let's look at that. That could potentially be scope B, is let's do all the siding. Let's do everything else we talked about, the porch ceiling, everything like that. I'm just going to eliminate the gutter work and the fascia work. And then scope C could either be, we're just looking at the back and the right side. We're just looking at the front and the right. We're just looking at the front and the back. See what I'm saying? It could be, there's so many hypotheticals we could waste all day. But the point is that we're dwindling down from the full boat. Like there's nothing more you could do to your house to make it weatherproof. That's scope A. Scope B is some of the needs and a couple of the wants, but not all of the wants. And then scope C is like what needs to be done, if not before I leave today, certainly within the next week. Otherwise, you're running the risk of some significant damage and significant additional costs by letting this problem perpetuate.
That makes sense. And the numbers in black for each scope, we have to manually adjust, or is there a...
Nope. Again, the numbers in black, meaning the siding, tear off, and second story, are just placeholders, just as the porch ceiling.
Yeah. Okay.
They're reference numbers, basically. Anything in black is a reference number that you're going to use to build the project.
Got you.
So I'm going to go with scope B here, which, what you mentioned is fine. I'm just going to say we're just doing side and no fascia work, no gutters. So I'm going to do this really quick. I'm just going to carry over all my numbers. I still got 14 and a half. I still got to get my OSB. So 14.5, I got 14.5. Degree of difficulty, I'm still doing that because I'm doing siding, right? Still got all my window wraps, so I'm going to carry that over. I still got my head flashing. I still need my trim, so I'm carrying that over. I'm not doing fascia overlay, so I don't need that. Where's our gutters? Oh, did we not put gutters? Oh, we did it. Oh, we did. Nope. Yeah, we did. Remove and replace, but I don't have any on the front. No, yeah, no. I don't have any on the left. So maybe it was just on the back. Okay, so it should be in there. So I'm going to go back to my Hardie pricing. For right now, this is an easy adjustment. This would be one of the wants that we're keeping in the job, which is painting the soffit, painting my garage doors, and painting the porch ceilings. But that can easily be removed, and it's going to save a pretty good chunk of change. But for right now, I'm going to put it in there, and I'm going to tell them this. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and put all that's painting the soffit, painting your garage doors. I really know you want those garage doors to look, like there's some continuity between the color of the garage doors and the house. I knew that was really important to you. I'm going to keep that in there, plus the painting of the porch ceiling. That's a super easy thing to move out of the project if you want me to, but for the sake of right now, I'm going to keep it in there and just put it in there. Insulation, I don't know. say we're going to remove that. Let's take away the insulation. I'm not too worried about it. I don't have any rooms that are on those sides. So let's eliminate the insulation. Remove and reinstall gutters. I don't need that. So that saved me $21.40 right there. So I'll put in a 0 as a placeholder. Mortar work. I don't know. I'll carry it over. Remove and replace lights. That happens automatically. Admin and processing. That happens. That's project management. That's processing the job. That's the paperwork. That's the warranty processing. All that junk carries over. My dumpster fee carries over. Not doing a permit. So now, what in the world? That's not right. Went up to 64,000. Something's.
Yeah, I was gonna say scope B is looking a little worse than scope A.
Yeah. Where did we go off here? Scope A's.
There was a number down low that looked pretty significantly off, like 20 grand or something different.
Yikes. $2.5, $9.
Right there. The rot repair and additional. If you look at cost of scope A versus cost of scope B,
oh yeah, what the heck?
It's drastically different. And then again, underneath mortar work needed,
yeah,
20,333. I'm guessing that's where the issue is. Make that a 0 and we're probably good. Or whatever, the 1130.
There's a bigger issue there because it's
a formula issue.
Yeah.
It should be 1130, but it's come up as 20,000.
It's doing like a sum. B2 through B92, E2 through E92. Oops. Okay, well, so I got to fix line 71. So I'm just going to take both of these out for right now because screwing things up. Okay, so there you go. Save 6, almost 10 grand. Okay, so now I get a really good, that's a significant drop. That's 20% reduction over scope A. So I'm going to keep that. Now we're going to go on to the bare bones, which is, let's just call it the front and the left. So I'm going to look here. I got 4 3.95 squares and 4.98. So I'm calling this 4. I'm calling this 5. So I'm going to say 9 squares of siding. So now instead of 14.5, I put 9 here. Again, look at all my greens populate the way they should. So I got my tear-offs instead of 14.5 now. I know it's all second story, so I put in 9. Oh, we said we weren't doing cut-up job. I don't know why I put that in there. Degree of difficulty, I still got that left side. So I'm putting in 5 squares for my degree of difficulty. Follow that? Window wrap. Whoops, get out of there. How many window wraps did I have on the front? I had 3, and I'm doing front and left. So I got 3 window wraps, no door wraps. So instead of 8, I'm going down to 3. My trim, I'm going to have to populate that myself. So I'm just going to cut it in half. So I'm going to call it 70. See how I did that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Essentially just took,
No fascia. Go ahead.
I was just saying you just took the two sides of the house out, a quarter each, so half total.
Well, what I did is I just said, okay, on my whole scope, which is 8 windows, I got 136 feet of linear feet of trim. I only got 3 windows here, so it's basically half, right? So I'm just going to take half of the 136. I'm calling it, rounding up, is 70.
Gotcha.
No fascia overlay. I don't have to worry about that. I'm doing the front, so I'm going to keep that's one thing I needed to carry over here that I missed. And I'm going to carry over my garage door wraps just because it's on the front of the house and you got some issues with it. Paint, we're not doing any, we're cutting all that paint out. So I'm putting in a 0 there to know I got it. And we're not doing insulation, we're not doing gutters. So we are all set. So now I drop that by half. And this is where you kind of need to have the talk like, hey, I really scaled down the scope of work significantly. Now I want you to understand, because I've have enough experience doing this. When you make a part of your house look brand new, it really does accentuate how poorly everything else looks. So because I've been doing this long enough and I've helped enough clients through this process, I'm just trying to stay ahead of the curve and let you know that doing the front and the left side, it's unfortunately going to make everything else look worse. So I'm not saying that with any, trying to direct you in any way, shape, or form. I want you to do what's affordable for you, what's comfortable. But I do want you to know that you may not be thrilled with how this new siding makes everything else look. And you're doing that because the inevitability is they're going to see it and everything else is going to look terrible compared to the front and the right side. But at least they'll be able to say, well, Chris warned me. And then they can either decide to do the change order if they were just kind of slow playing you and they had the money, they just didn't want to spend the money. That will be revealed very easily when they call you and say, hey, Chris, I love the work that you guys did, but now the back and the right side look completely atrocious. Let's just go add that all back in. And that will happen. And you'll be able to tell, yeah, I kind of knew they had the money, they just didn't want to spend it. And for whatever reason, they decided on that reduced scope of work. Well, now we're bumping them up to the full scope of work. So now I have I got the full boat. I got some needs and wants with some wants eliminated. And here I just got needs. And that's a good way to talk to people. That's a good way that they can rationalize what's a want, what's a need. I don't need all the things I need, right? I don't want, or I don't need all the things I want. So that's what I'm eliminating some of those in scope B. And then in scope C, I'm taking them out altogether. And I'm saying, this is what needs to be done. Beyond opinion, beyond, any feelings that I have or opinions I have, this is factual. This needs to be done, or you're going to have significant damage and additional significant cost that's going to result if this doesn't get done. But that's how we use this firewall. And again, you should use this often because it means that you're giving people the best information possible. And it means that you're also being sensitive to their needs, which is, hey, maybe we don't need to do X, Y, Z. We can eliminate that if we need to be sensitive to cost. So you should be utilizing these pretty frequently.
So a question on the videos, when you do like your Hardie video, do you do one for scope A, scope B, and scope C, or do you just?
Absolutely not.
Okay, I didn't think so, but so you just do scope A and then you make notes on what they take out kind of thing?
No, that's why I said probably the best practice is doing the video the very last thing you do before you leave the home.
So, I mean, but let's say they want like a week to decide, or, they take advantage of the 7 days. Do we just wait and do the video once they decide, just swing by? And
I'm not going to, because I don't want to go back out there, right? I'm killing my GP if I make 2 trips when I could have made 1. My personal GP.
Yeah,
how much time, how much gas, how much effort, how many hours did I put into the paperwork and the proposal? That's my personal GP. I've told you all this before. Company has a GP, but so do you. And if you don't manage your GPs, and if you don't leverage the mobility and the remoteness, the remote capabilities of what we do, you're killing your hourly wage. So for me, I'm going to do a video and I'm going to say in scope A, we're going to do blah, 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 blah. In scope B, we're taking that out. That's what I'm going to do on my video. If they say, hey, I need a week, I need a month, I need a whatever to decide, I'm still going to do a video there before I leave because I don't want to go back. And I'm going to make mention, okay, on scope this, we're going to reduce this. If they choose this scope, I'm going to go with, we're going to take out these. We're not going to do that up there. We're not going to do this over here. We're not going to do this here. That's only in the full scope if they choose that way.
That makes sense. So you just talk about all three scopes in the same video.
Yeah, which isn't ideal, but hopefully you've got them narrowed down. Even if you have to go through this exercise, you've got them narrowed down to a scope of work before you leave.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So it'll be pretty infrequent, and the reality is if they're that undecisive, you're probably not going to get that job anytime soon anyways. So it really doesn't matter. If they can't decide on a scope of work, or you fail to get them to a scope of work, your chances of getting that job are slim to none anyways. So what does the video matter? So does that make sense? That's how we successfully use this firewall, this pricing sheet. And obviously whatever you select down here gets added to your pricing page, your payment options here. So if I just do the reduced scope, hopefully nothing else is checked here, 25090. Yeah, I got this. So that's how we build the price, how we build different scopes of work, and then how we transfer that into a price that we can provide the client. Any questions on any of that?
No, sir.
Okay, 1240. So basically from here, we have two other tabs that we have to go through, and I'll go through them quickly. So we have no siding. This is your spec sheet. So this absolutely installation needs for the installers and for the project managers. Install siding, second story. I know I got 14.5. So the same thing here. This is populating. The greens should be populating. Get out of there. Go on, move. I can't get to my tab because of this thing. There we go. So I'm going to do, let's just say we're doing this scope. Okay, so now see when I check the scope, all my fields populated. Okay, so if they auto-populate here, all I need to do is check the box. No door openings, we're overlaying, actually we're tearing off. So what I need to do is go here, select tear off, and I need to put in 14.5. And then it subtracts the overlay, see that? I got 14 and a half, 15 squares of OSB. I got 15 squares of OSB second story because it's all upstairs. I got Hardie wrap. My style of Hardie, I'm doing cedar mill select 8 1/4. So I'm going to put in 14 and a half here. Some of these, if you click on the cell, you'll see the little slide rule. Some of them I didn't do that. So I'm calling it 14. We're doing that on the whole house, so we don't have to, these are just if you have additional areas that are something else. Like a lot of times, if you have a board and batten area and you have, cedar mill select on the back of the house, or you have cedar mill select everywhere and you're doing staggered edge or rough edge shingles everywhere on the gables, you would have two different styles of siding. See how that can be used?
Yes, sir. Real quick on the OSB, like since like in this scenario, it's all second story, do we still check OSB and then also check OSB second story?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because the OSB is just saying, hey, are we using OSB? The OSB second story is saying how much of that OSB is second story.
Got it. So if we were like, let's say there was 30 OSB, but only 15 up, then we do 30 and then 15. Okay.
Correct. So we're going through here. I got fascia in the green here, so I got to check the box. See that? We're not doing Hardie soffit, we're painting. We're not doing 1x2. We are doing 136 feet of 1x4. So I got to check my box there. We are doing a single and a double garage door wrap. So I got to check those boxes. Now here's the paint. This is a little bit more difficult. So if I go to my Hardie pricing sheet, see my total squares of paint?
Oh, yes, sir.
So I'm basically 23 and a half. I got 24 squares of paint. So what I have to do on the spec sheet is I need to break these out 24 squares. This total squares here down at the bottom needs to be 24. So installed Hardie, I know I got 14 and a half. Existing soffit, what did we say? That was 375 or something. Again, going back to my measure sheet. 375 right there. So for my soffit, I know it was a 1 foot soffit, so I'm going 3.75 here. Existing fascia is we're installing the fascia, so we don't have to worry about that.
The porch ceiling was 1.
Porch ceiling, I think we said 3 1/4. Exterior doors, we didn't say any garage doors. We said, I think 1 1/2. So I'm right where I need to be. I got 23 squares on here. This spec sheet, so for the sake of you understanding this shouldn't be necessarily rounded. So if some of these numbers are lower, that's actually better. Because this is more for the installer and the project manager saying, this is how many squares we have. That's why this, honestly, here should probably be 14. Because if there's 14 on here, that means we're paying them for 14 squares, not for 15 or 14 and a half. We need extra material because there's waste. But they don't put that waste on the house. That waste goes into a trash can. So if we're on the spec sheet, we need to price for the waste because we need the material. We don't install the waste. So you don't want the installers, if you have 3 squares of waste, you don't want the installers getting paid for 17 squares of siding if the house is only 14.
That makes sense.
So this spec sheet, these numbers should not be inflated. These should be where they're true. Does that make sense? So I'm fine with this saying 14. I'm fine with this saying 23 squares total of paint. Just happened. That used to be. Whatever. There we go. I'm fine with that saying 23. It matches up close enough to my pricing tab that was showing like 23.56. I'm good with that. Okay, so gutter, here's my gutters on the back of the house. I got to check this box because it's populated already over here. And then special notes would be anything additional that's not already captured in your notes. These would be installer specific things. I might put in here. I'd probably put that in there because, I mean, that's me. I mean, So you put your special notes in there, and then your spec sheet is done. You just have to make sure that whatever, especially the paint section, whatever white columns are filled out that need to be filled out, and that this corresponding check mark is next to any item that has a number in it on the right side. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
So that's your spec sheet. Your labor sheet is easier because it super duper populates. The only thing really that we need to be aware of is this one white cell. Everything else, these yellow cells are for the project manager. Acceptance. So this populates off here, if I recall correctly. So once you fill out your firewall, based on the discounted price, which we'll say was, so let's call the job total to be 4484. Here you have to make sure, I need to change this too. God dang it. Change. This happens all the time. So you need to make sure that these are all 2 decimals. Let me move our. So I'm going to put 2 decimals here because if it's not exact, I don't know if you've noticed that. None of the firewalls have it. And I meant to ask Jason to change it.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you're talking about now, but yeah, we don't have decimals right now. So
yeah, so I'm going to change that on all the firewalls, and so 48484. Now this should go to my firewall, 40,484. Now this should go to my pricing Hardie labor sheet to give me my number. So look at that. Total labor burden, 6,127. Total job was 40,484. I'm right on target with my labor burden.
That makes sense. Okay.
So that's my first check into I priced this job correctly. But that's just on paper. That's not extra labor. That's not, we ran into this. We hit this. We had to bring scaffold for this. We blah, 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 whatever. This is on paper. This is telling me I'm getting paid on this job right now. But, that's a far cry from what we find when we go out to the house.
Yes, sir.
But now I got my spec sheet filled out. I got my labor sheet filled out. My firewall will be filled out, obviously. I got cash discount in here. I did my check. I didn't have finance fees, so I don't need the red line here. And I'm pretty much good to go. I don't know if I can do it on this sheet on my Mac, but it's, again, at this point, it's the same thing as Windows, right? We move all our sheets, all our tabs over. Hardie work order, which they're already there. I think they're already set up that way. So now I got all these that I need for Hardie and my Hardie work order. Why don't we go through that? I don't know if we're going to get to the presentation. It's already one.
Yes, sir, no worries.
But this is pretty self-explanatory with the work order. You're built Make sure you. Email. And just in case you didn't know this, I think you did. We have this set up where this Hardie firewall populates every other, or not firewall. This Hardie work order populates every other work order.
Yes, sir. I always fill out the Hardie one.
Okay, good. So that's nothing new for you coming to Windows. Here, I really can't train on this. You're just going to have to be careful because it's based on the scope of work. So when you select, we're not overlaying, we're removing. And I read these, every one of them with the client before I have them initial them. And I paraphrase, I don't read the whole thing, but at least read the first, probably sentence.
At least enough to make sure it's clearly understood.
Yep. Here you have to fill in. And again, it's a little bit different on the Mac versus the iPad. Specify areas. All four sides. And what I typically do with these is bold them so they stand out. I don't use my Mac for this.
Just hit Command B. It'll bold it.
What? Control B?
It'll be a command on the keyboard. It's an Apple keyboard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just if you highlight the text and then Command B, it'll bold it.
How about that?
Command U will underline it. Things like that.
Nice. There we go. We're helping each other today.
It's a training video, right?
So I bold those. Install Hardie fascia. We are doing that. We are pressure washing everywhere we're painting. So in here, garage. Soffit, porch ceiling. So those are the extra areas that we're painting that will need to be pressure washed. Absolutely. Check the caulking box. Check the wood because that's my soffit. Check the Loxon always because that's the only way we paint. Doors. The only doors we're painting are garage. So just write garage. Color can either be, TBD or match siding. So you're always going to, well, not always. If you're painting doors, you're going to check that. Always check this if we're painting. Protect all areas and surfaces. Client to be responsible for moving all objects. We always check that. We always check client to be responsible for removal of items hanging on the interior of the exterior walls that may be damaged during construction. Always check that. Always check cleanup job site. I usually star that. And I tell people this is a huge initiative. It's one of our 4 C's that I told you about. If at any point in time you don't feel like your house is clean and safe, meaning you can walk outside and not worry about tripping over something or, taking a framing nail to the ankle, whatever the case is, if at any point you don't feel safe or that it's clean, I want you to call me immediately. And I usually star that one.
Okay. That probably makes them feel good.
Yep. So wherever it's yellow, they have to sign. Now for my notes. So check this out. So this is so easy. Copy. I'm going back to my work order. Look at that. Oops.
And here's another hotkey opportunity. You can use Command C, Command V for copy and paste. Just highlight the box at Command C and then go back to the work order and then hit Command V.
Command B or P?
V, Victor.
Victor, wow. So you get the point here. So this will make it super easy for you. You said Command, no, not B, Command C?
V, yeah, Command C to copy.
Command V.
And then Command V to paste.
So now you can populate your notes just like that. And then you have you don't have to initial these, but you have the client initial anywhere that it's yellow.
Okay.
This is only the 3-day right to cancel. They don't have to sign that.
So that's just the client initialing, not the DC as well?
Correct. On the per side. All these are for the client.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Get them to sign here. You sign here. If there's any additional project notes, you can put it here. And then basically you're all set. And then basically when you build your paperwork, just don't forget to have them initial all these. That's a common thing, is people forget to have that. And then when you build your paperwork, it's the same way you build your window paperwork. We're just taking firewall all the way to Hardie work order.
Okay. And then take that portion out. All right.
Yep. And then you would do the Hardie work order just like we do with Windows. You would do that as a separate document.
Standalone. Okay.
Yep. And that's really it, man. I mean, that's your paperwork process from, you know, creation of pricing to price delivery and phased or scope delivery, and then actually putting the paperwork together.
Oh, sounds good. And it's good we recorded it too, because I can just watch through this.
Yeah, we didn't get to the Hardie siding presentation. So we'll just have to do that next week, which means I just need you to bust your butt this weekend. I'll give you some jobs to build. And then just start to look into the presentation.
Yes, sir.
But then we should be at a place where next week, the only thing you have to do is get that presentation nailed down. And that's something, honestly, I might be able to do that today, depending on what happens with Deuce and Dwayne. They're both waiting right now in the waiting room, but I should be able to record that on my own and get that over to you.
Okay. Yeah. If not, sir, I'll definitely at least be able to start taking a look at it. So,
but that's what I need from you this weekend is working on this firewall sheet. I'm going to give you a couple jobs to build, and then, you getting ultra comfortable with that. So literally all we have to do next week is just work on the prezo.
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
Cool. Any other questions you can think of?
No, sir. Not at the moment.
Okay. We are done. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir. We'll see you next time.